Hello everybody, Jen here, City of Minot. Since we last met, we got a new mayor. Thank you to everyone who turned out to vote. Keep expecting the best of each other, keep challenging each other, and keep showing up for the Minot that we are choosing together. Now, with that being said, Monday night we called the vote 12 times. 4 personal appearances. Let's get into the Minot Minutiae. Kicked off the meeting right away with the city manager's report. There was a report from the engineering department. They have $600,000 that is budgeted for this year but has not been spent. And so they're looking at putting together a package of smaller projects that would help to chip away at our backlog. That $600,000 is the result of, competitive pricing. They had budgeted for tariffs that didn't come into play as much as they feared it would. Different contingency lines for different projects. One example he used was the North Broadway Frontage Road project. They had some concerns about how they were going to restore the curb there. Turned out that it was fine, but we had budgeted for the worst case scenario. So that's where that $600,000 comes from.
Channeling the tax-paying public, what we don't want to get to is, we got some extra, we better find a way to spend it. This actually does the opposite of that, right? Because we go and get things done that should decrease our burden as time goes by.
The roads that we're going to focus on now with these remaining budgeted funds are backlog items, right? They're known needs that we have to address, but when we're putting our projects together, they didn't fit the budget that we had going in, or they might be a couple years down the list. And so when we have savings like this, we're then able to pull those projects into our work program.
In the consent agenda, we had 14 items on the agenda, 13 passed in bulk. 5.13 was pulled, and that was for that survey. So this will be the third time that we've done a community satisfaction survey. We've done it every other year, 2021, 23, now 25. But it was pulled for more discussion. The reason it was on the agenda at all is because we're looking at using a different company to conduct that survey. But there was some continued discussion on that survey, but it will be moving forward, so be watching for that in the fall. So that takes us into action items, which I have color-coded because they kind of fit together in sets. So 6.1 and 6.8. are both dealing with fire department budgets. 6.1 was to move money into their medical services line. The reason they were coming up short in that medical services line is because they are adding the Cortico app, which has to do with wellness for first responders. The reason it matches with 6.8 is because that's a grant or permission to apply for a grant that would cover that Cortico app, which would take care of that budget amendment from 6.1. Both were approved unanimously. We'll go into our blue marked ones. Those ones are flood buyouts. So 6.2, 6.4, and 6.5. It's 3 different properties. 6.2 and 6.4 are both for MI8. So this is beyond the zoo, downstream from the zoo.
In all 3 of these properties, we're paying over our 15% extra allotment. And some of the reasonings I'd heard is because eminent domain is expensive to go through and everything like that. I guess I would ask the city attorney, Steph, in your opinion, we're paying on this property about $200,000 over the appraised value, and on Mr. Brecky's next property, we're paying $170,000 over appraised value. So we're going to spend almost $400,000 extra. Do you believe if we had to go to eminent domain that our legal fees for him and us would cost us $400,000?
So it's not just one set of attorney's fees that are being paid. That being said, I would say, was the number $400,000?
Just under $400,000.
For one eminent domain case?
Between the 2 properties. It was 170 and 200.
It seems extensive. Without seeing the file, it seems like a fairly rich legal bill.
In addition to those fees, any eminent domain procedure could last 2 years, 1 year, 2 years, which could really delay the project.
If we go to the eminent domain, both parties would present their appraisal. And the city still has the risk that the judge may not go with the city's appraisal. They could go with the property owner's appraisal. And so you would be awarding the higher appraised value plus the city paying the attorney's fees going forward.
If this does not pass, what happens?
Mayor Jans or Alderman Olson, we would go back to the drawing board with the individuals and present a case to them and see what their feelings are and possibly have to take that next step if we cannot come to an amicable agreement.
Both of our MI8 properties, 6.2 and 6.4, both failed 2 to 4. So those were dissents from Pittner, Blessam, Samuelson, and Fuller. We moved on to 6.5. This one has to do with MI4, which is over by the Maple diversion instead. This one was also 15% over the appraised value. It did pass. The vote was 4 to 2 with dissents from Fuller and Samuelson. Moving on to the green in our color code. In 6.6, it's a budget amendment for our property nuisance team. We grew our code enforcement team. It was a response to that community satisfaction survey. So we added a part-time code enforcement officer. We have several that are going through the abatement process, and our funding is going to run out before we can address those 14 properties that are in the abatement process. 6.7 looked at when our agenda is going to be published. 6.9 was in reference to our city manager transition. As we talked about in the Minot Minutia on Monday, City Manager Harold Stewart has announced his resignation in Minot. He'll be moving on to other things. We wish him all the best.
Very appreciative of your service to the city, your involvement in the community, and your sense of humor and work ethic. And so we want to give you something to remind you of Minot when you're over west.
My experience with Minot started back when my father was stationed here at the Air Force Base. And this was one way, at least a part of my career, that I could give back to the community that helped make me who I am today. And I appreciate the council that hired me and the council and mayors that I've served with. But more importantly, I want to thank the staff for the great job that you've done. We've really kind of pushed the throttle over the last several years and made a lot of changes and helped put this organization and this community in a better direction. And I wish this community and this council and this staff nothing but the best going forward, and that you make Minot what you envision it to be. And tonight's been a good example of hearing some strong opinions on different sides of issues, and I think this conversation is healthy, and I'm grateful that these discussions are happening publicly, because I don't know how much those were happening as frequently prior to me being here. And I think that's a sign that we've increased transparency, we've increased engagement, and it's beginning to involve the people, and those opinions are coming out. And I think that's great, and I think that's healthy. But again, I just want to say thank you to everyone that I've had the opportunity to work with. This is a bittersweet moment. I've had a lot of people ask me if I'm excited, and half of me, yes, is excited, and half of me is heartbroken to leave. I find it ironic that the mayor thanked me for my sense of humor. I don't know how often I've put that out there. But again, just a sincere thank you.
Of course, as a part of that transition is what happens next.
We have to balance two things here. One, I think that we've got a good stable of potential candidates right within our city organization, okay? We have an assistant city manager, and there's been discussions, you see the social media stuff about why in the world did we hire an assistant city manager? Well, tomorrow morning, we have an assistant city manager assuming the role of city manager in the interim, and that's a good thing for us. Okay, it allows us some continuity in where we're headed. Now, whether that continues forever in exactly that format, that's up to the council to decide.
So I feel strongly that we would like an attempt to find the appropriate candidate internally within, start the process. And if within 30 days you're not seeing what you're looking for, we can move to a third-party outsourcing recruitment, as you did for my role, for Chief Fry's role. But I strongly believe that with the tools and resources that exist, we can get you a good candidate pool internally within about 30 days.
Similar to Monday's Minute Minutia, I'm going to skip 6.3. That sales tax discussion will end with that one. In miscellaneous and discussion, MAC EDC gave their presentation to council. And then in 8.2, also miscellaneous and discussion, the Economic Development Committee presented all of their thoughts on the committee's work. That brings us back to 6.3, sales tax.
Mr. Mayor?
Alderman Blessam.
I'd like to move option 2.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded for option 2. Discussion.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I could, one of the reasons why I think number 2 is the optimal way to go about this is there, we had some recommendations from staff about how GASB looks at this, which is the government accounting standards, and public safety, if you read the definitions in the GASB standards, fits this quite well for what I believe the intent of the discussion and the motion is to begin with, which is to fund police, fire, dispatch, even in the GASB standards, animal control, which, in our case is a part of the police department. And so I think that is a nice fit, and while I understand the other thoughts of the other options, I think this fits the intent. One of the things that I love about this proposal is to me, it's a pull forward from discussions that have been on council over the last couple of years. The idea that police and fire are a core service for what we're doing and what we're trying to take care of as a city, and to provide dedicated funding, though sales tax can be a little flawed and cyclical. We got to be careful with that. We don't want to say that it's a stable funding source, because that's not the point. What it is to me is it's an addition or an alternative funding source, and it is something that can be dedicated there. And so for me, this is such a great way to take those council thoughts and pull them forward in today's reality, and to reallocate those funds to take care of those that are taking care of us on the streets every single day. And so I will be supporting this wholeheartedly. I think this is the absolute right approach that we should take.
All of the proceeds from the half-cent would go to police and fire. So there would not be a carve-out for economic development. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, so as drafted, I see the city attorney shaking her head. Yes, that was the intent, and that is the draft.
Yes, with option 2, that's how that would be written. And so, like Alderman Blesson mentioned, the GASB standards has a really broad definition for public services. And so it wouldn't just be police, fire, dispatch, animal control, everything that would fall within their definition.
Looking back at some of the history related to these sales tax pennies, they've been approved by the voters. And each time they have been approved to support economic development in some form or fashion. And I feel very uncomfortable now, one meeting after this was introduced, to make that dramatic of a change. We haven't given the public much of an opportunity to hear about this or to give us their feedback. And while I remain a staunch supporter of our public services, I feel that completely cutting out economic development is not the right decision at this point, because I just feel that it is so important to hear from those that are impacted by that. And so tonight, I could not support that. I would rather truly that we didn't vote and that we tabled it and gave it a little bit more time.
I guess I would ask if you can support a half-cent when we add it to the people's burden, but you can't when it's replaced, then we got to look at priorities, because then the priority isn't supporting fire and police. It's making sure you bring in more money. And that's on the backs of the people. That's where that tax comes from. This isn't a matter of saying, well, that is our priority, but only if we have enough. No, they're our first priority. And that's exactly what this does.
The pieces of that half penny are property tax relief. So, in essence, you could say, well, we're already supporting police and fire with property tax. So that's kind of a substitution. It's not really necessarily a gain, because somewhere else the property tax needs to even out, and the other part of it, which is improvements, in the 26 budget contains a number of items that we have tried to accomplish every year, such as upgrading and replacement of our traffic signals on a scheduled methodology. And if the change that's moved and seconded is approved, that money will be gone, and that $400,000 worth of improvements will either be canceled or will need to be funded from some other source. So I just want everybody to make sure you understand that that's what's in play here.
One of the cardinal sins as a business owner, one of the cardinal sins to any organization is undercapitalization, and that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to undercapitalize our organization, whether it's competing interests from public safety, and yes, that is priority number one, I agree. Economic development. Those things, I believe, those are what drive your sales tax. Those economic development efforts are what increase your sales tax. The programs like TRF, the organizations like the Chamber EDC, those are the things that drive your sales tax, that improve your business climate. So I would like to see, at least for the consideration, we always talk about giving it back to the voters. Let the voters decide. So let's draft a resolution for a half-cent property sales tax, half-cent, to be sunset in 5 years. It'll align somewhat or post-NAWS when we can reallocate some of those funds.
The voice of the people has told us consistently they want lower taxes. They want their services taken care of and they want lower taxes. This is an opportunity to do that. It's to take care of exactly the focus the city should have and not hang another heavy weight around the necks of the taxpayer.
And if the priority for us, I believe, is our police and fire, but if it's economic development, it can still be done. It just has to be fought for. I'm tired of the police and fire having to fight for it. Let's make it fight the other direction.
Roll was called twice for 6.3 pertaining to public safety and those sales tax pennies. Initially, the motion was to accept option 2, which simply said half of 1 penny goes to public safety. There was a motion to table that. That failed 2-4 with dissents from Blessum, Fuller, Pittner, and Samuelson, which brought us back to the original motion for option 2. That also failed 3-3 with dissents from Janser, Olson, and Pittner. Alderman Pittner, who voted no in both of those motions, suggested a different approach.
I'm going to direct staff to work with leadership of the police and fire to draft ballot language for a half-cent sales tax to be dedicated to public safety, shifting non-salary and benefit expenses to sales tax to reduce the property tax pressure on the general fund and to include a sunset of 5 years or to align with the NAWS commitment being made. And again, I'm just going to direct staff. I'd like to see that. We'll call it on the first meeting in October. Mike mentioned that it was part of my president's letter when I was president of council because of the pressures, if Measure 4 became a reality, what it would do to the commitments that we have as a city, as well as the ongoing pressures that we have with potentially a cap. Now we got a 3% cap, not a 0% cap, but a 3% cap, and we're seeing those just holding the status quo. Kind of quote Harold here. Holding the status quo gets more expensive.
We'll have a lot more discussion about our sales tax pennies at a future meeting. Not this next meeting, though. This next meeting, we're going to seat our new mayor, which will open up that 7th seat on Minot City Council. What happens next? It's a lot more discussion for next time on the Minot Minutiae.